Suzanne LaGrande, and today I'm speaking with Apricot Irving, who is a writer, journalist, and teacher, about her experiences living through the pandemic. To start, I'm wondering if you could talk about what your life was like before the pandemic began. It was just an average day.
Well, it's funny. I was just about to head into a busy couple months of writing classes and flying to New York to teach a workshop and readings. And I had spent a lot of weeks and months leading up to it getting all those organized. And then it was kind of amazing. Within 2 days, it had all disappeared. Everything fell. And we were in this new reality together of being suddenly very curtailed in our movements. And to be honest, I'm a writer first, and being an author and having events is new. So it felt like something of a relief to suddenly be forced to get quiet again and to not have my days fill up with email and event scheduling, but just to be forced to sit still again. And I'm not writing as much as I would like to be yet. I think, like most of us, there's a lot to process. And I think that I'm processing it, and then I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm worried, and I wake up and the dreams are all my subconscious processing it in ways that I didn't realize I was worried and anxious. But it's forced me back into quiet again.
Mm-hmm. What kind of things are you worried about?
Oh, I'm worried about friends who are suddenly unemployed or who own small businesses and are struggling. I'm worried about friends who are in their 70s, relatives, people with fragile health. I didn't know I had so many people that I loved that had compromised immune systems. I'm worried about how we will all collectively recover from this, and if this will be a moment to really take into consideration the well-being of the whole, or if it's going to be another event that it concentrates power and wealth, and that we aren't thinking about everyone.
Certainly, part of this situation has made clear what some of the fractures and inequalities are in our society. Have you noticed any particular ones that stand out to you as like, oh, this is really clear that this is not working and hasn't been?
Well, the access to medical care. I mean, the fact that we're even having conversations about whether the tests for the virus should be free, or if individuals should have to pay for them, much less treatment for these trips to the hospital. I mean, it shouldn't be that we have to consider whether we're at risk of losing our home, for example, to be able to cover our medical bills. That should be not a question for anyone to have to struggle with.
You live in a fairly rural community. Could you talk about what issues or differences that might involve as opposed to somebody who lives in a more urban area being under quarantine?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the advantages is it feels very lucky to be able to still walk over empty country roads. That's a great gift. We live on a lot of property, and so there's room to run around. It's interesting, being such a small community, we tend to know who the first responders are. There's a small rural fire department, and it's manned by volunteers. And there was an emergency preparedness meeting before we all went into lockdown, and the fire chief made it very clear that there's a really small group of people that are able to respond to emergencies. And if any of those people get sick or are suddenly unable to help, our little community is really going to be in crisis. And so just warning people in advance why all of these precautions are so necessary. And we went grocery shopping before. We're on day 11 of isolation as a family, and we were coming to the end of all the fresh vegetables had run out, and so we were trying to order online and be as careful as we could to keep out of the mix of social gatherings. And I'd stopped by the little market that's out in our community, and there was a sign posted out front about how, please, if you're not from this area, that we have many at-risk people living out here, please consider taking your business elsewhere. And that was even when I'd called ahead and they had the box waiting for me, and we're sterilizing the pens with bleach in between each signature for the credit card transactions.
Mm-hmm.
I think we feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Same as everyone, I suppose.
Yeah. How is it that you have found to deal with fear and uncertainty, which is, I think, something that everybody is struggling with?
Well, I have been using a trick that my therapist taught me a few years ago, which has been so valuable. And it was about how setting aside time every day to panic and freak out can be really valuable, but try to give it an apportioned time of your day and no more. So that when I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm finding myself worrying, I can say, oh, right, I'm going to have my panic and freak out time at noon to 12:30. And we do it as a family. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old and my partner, my husband. And so we'll try really hard to save all of our collective worrying together for the middle of the day. And we'll talk about what we've read on the news and what we've heard and the latest stuff. And we'll kind of worry together and then say, oh, okay, right, ready to move on now. Because it can be really wearing to live in that space of anxiety constantly. So I'm trying to give it room, but also not let it take over. Mm-hmm. So when I sat down with the kids the very first day, when it just felt like everything was spinning so quickly, and they were really reeling. One of them was supposed to get together with a friend from out of state that's only here like twice a year, and school had just let out the day before, and so part of me thought, well, he's seen all his friends from school already. If they've had it, they've shared it. But then there was this other friend from out of state, and I couldn't do it. I said, sweetheart, I'm afraid we're not going to be able to see him. We have to be able to protect his grandmother. And he was really sad and really frustrated, but then he got it. So when we did our panic and freak out together collectively on that day, it's like, all right, let's talk about what we're afraid of. Let's talk about where we are feeling the loss today. And then let's talk about what we feel really grateful for, and talk about maybe what we might hope to be able to do in this, at the time, 14 days that we knew we were going to be isolating. And now, it's a much longer stretch. But that's one thing we do. It's funny, I went on a walk with my 14-year-old one of the days, and I had been a little bit testy that morning. We'd all been squabbling because we're all on top of each other. We only see each other besides phone calls, which is good. But I was saying something about how, I work really hard to keep my emotions in equilibrium. I have lots of strategies that I use. I was like, but you know what it would be like if I wasn't working this hard. And he's like, I know, Mom. Oh, we're going to know all each other's secrets by the end of this.
Have you been surprised by anything that has happened?
Oh, I've loved the images of people lighting candles and singing together, and this collective gratitude for the people that are out there doing these essential jobs, bringing us food, keeping that food supply going in hospitals, the first responders. It's kind of, I miss that being out in the rural context. I don't have a sense of sharing with my neighbors in our gratitude together for that. We have to come up with other creative ways of gathering, but I've loved that and been surprised by it. And I think, too, and you mentioned this perhaps already in your opening, this is something that for the first time feels global. I mean, I suppose climate change is also a global crisis, but it didn't always feel like everyone was aware of it and sharing the worry over it, whereas this one feels a lot closer to being a shared global urgent concern. We're all impacted by it, and we all will be impacted by it in ways that we can't anticipate yet. It's still, the wave is still coming. We haven't yet seen what the impact will be. And I think, I grew up in Haiti as a kid, locked up on a missionary compound plenty of times when there would be political disturbances and all the roads were shut, or there would be an environmental crisis and we'd be stuck in one place with floods or hurricanes, or there would be an epidemic. And so in many ways this feels very familiar. There's plenty of places around the world that live with uncertainty on a daily basis. And so that doesn't feel like a surprise. It feels like oh, right, of course. This kind of uncertainty in my body when I'm like not really thinking about anything and it comes back to me during the day, that's something that's far more universally shared than sometimes as Americans we always remember. Sometimes I feel like we have this illusion that we can control our situation and make a plan and make it happen, and we get really bent sideways when things don't go according to plan. And this is a moment where we are all experiencing together that there are things beyond our control and we can't plan. And so what can we do? We can notice. We can try to stay curious. We can I'm trying as a mom to be a good enough mom, not trying to be perfect, trying to be honest and vulnerable with my kids and practice that with them, trying to be a good enough writer, which is like 45 minutes a day at this point, but that's something, a good enough partner, a good enough friend, trying to reach out to somebody that I love a day and have a good phone call that feels like connection.
What would you hope would change as a result of having gone through this, both locally in your community and also globally?
The first thing that I hope for is that it would have a lasting impact on our need to create a more sustainable balance in terms of our usage of energy and resources and our care for this planet that is our home. And it's been astounding to realize how quickly we can act when we are forced to. I mean, to just see the drop in emissions globally, clear skies over China, the aerial images over Italy and China, and I'm sure now over the U.S. as well, just seeing the drop in light pollution and energy pollution, it's kind of astounding that the fact that we have more fossil fuel than there is demand for it, and so we're worrying about places to store this, that feels like a really hopeful thing to me. And my husband has a job that causes him to fly across the country all the time, and sometimes for 1-hour meetings, and it just has always felt absurd and wasteful and problematic. And now all of that's being done on conference calls. And I hope that coming out of this, there'll be a different kind of realization of what we need to do versus what we've just gotten used to doing, and really to step back and evaluate strategically what's best for our future. And it feels kind of incredible that this would have been the 50th anniversary, well, it still will be, of Earth Day in April. There won't be large gatherings to celebrate it, but this Earth is getting a rest from us and our exertion and our exploitation of it in a way that I certainly didn't ever anticipate, and that it would happen this quickly. It's quite astounding. And I do have hope about that. I have hope that maybe this forced rest of paying attention I know for me, one of the things that keeps me hopeful in moments like this is just minding the smallest beautiful things. Maybe just the crunch of homemade bread, or walking out along the road and a little weed growing up through a crack in the sidewalk, or the sound of a bird in spring. There's so many fewer planes flying overhead. I can hear the birds differently now. I went out today and I picked a little sprig of a pink flowering plum tree and this bright yellow lichen that had fallen off a branch of a walnut tree. I don't know why only walnut trees seem to have this bright yellow lichen on it, but that kind of paying attention, I think, is what keeps us, what keeps me hopeful.
I am Suzanne LaGrande, and this is We Are All in This Together.